That I want to do before we really get started on tonight is just do a little bit of a refresher of social Darwinism and the social gospel leading up to what we've been talking about with US imperialism. So if you remember, social Darwinism took Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest and applied it to human society as well as business corporations. So individuals compete to get to the top of the social ladder, and the fittest in society are the ones that make it. Therefore, if you're wealthy, successful, you're the most fit in the natural order of society. John Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, they're just the most fit. And likewise, businesses compete against each other. And the biggest, the wealthiest corporations were the most successful because they were the fittest, they were the survivors, the strongest, the best. So Standard Oil, Carnegie Steel, they were the corporate giants they were because they were just the fittest and the strongest and the best. So social Darwinism equated monetary wealth and power with being the most fit in both individual people and in corporations and businesses. And of course, you know, the wealthiest, most powerful people in corporations, they're all Anglo-Saxon, as were the most successful and powerful nations. Therefore, it only stood to reason the Anglo-Saxon race is superior, not only in wealth and power, but also because this was really big with social Darwinism, because they have the strongest innate capacity for free self-government and for creating the most robust markets and economy. So the social gospel coincided and worked hand in hand with social Darwinism, and it brought in Protestantism as the most superior and fit religion, of course, developed and promoted by Anglo-Saxons. And the social gospel by no means believed that any race could become as fit or innately endowed as whites, but they did believe Anglo-Saxon Protestants still had a duty to address a lot of the problems that urbanization was bringing on. But as far as imperialism, to also take the gospel to these lesser races in our new territories. So social Darwinism and the social gospel kind of worked together there and maintained whites as the superior race. The other races that the US was coming into contact with due to this, you know, imperial advances, they were seen as inferior in every way, racially, religiously, politically, socially, culturally, economically. So racial superiority had been, hold on, I want to see when I got to get my first slide up here. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm good. Racial superiority in the US, I mean, we talked about before, it had been well established before now. Even if you had never seen a non-white person in your life, you well knew they existed, and that you as a white person was superior to them in many ways. So in this education, I mean, a lot of times it's spread through media images, through editorial cartoons, through advertisements, through words that are conveying these ideas of inferiority or superiority. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. We're going to take a look at some of the political cartoons from this time. And when we start going through them, look for elements of social Darwinism and also the social gospel. I think we looked at a couple of newspapers, but a lot of the samples I picked are from Judge Magazine and Puck Magazine. And I'll tell you about those in just a second. But as we go through these, ask yourself, who did these illustrations? And I'm not so much what was the name of the person or something like that, but what societal group did they come from? What gender, what race? What was their education? What socioeconomic group did they come from? Okay, so who did the illustrations? Who was the intended audience? The same question. Who are these images and all targeting, or messages? You know, what groups read Judge Magazine or Puck Magazine or the newspaper? You know, so again, think of the societal group, gender, race, education, socioeconomics, all of that. Third, think about what was the message here? And lastly, think about, well, how are the subjects portrayed? So we're mostly going to look at Puck, Judge, and I think we look at a couple from Life and a couple of newspapers. Puck started in the United States, but it was a German language, like weekly. It was one of our most popular journals. It had a lot of political and social satire to it, but Puck was extremely anti-Irish, and it always had all kinds of articles and illustrations that condemned the Catholic Church. You know, the Pope is a menace to the democratic soul of America. If we keep allowing all these Catholics to come in the country, the Pope is going to take over. Judge was, it's also a weekly, and it was pretty sharp too. It had some political and social satire. It started later by some of the artists and illustrators who had left Puck. So Judge is a solidly Republican journal, and it attacked the Democratic administration of Grover Cleveland. And if you remember from last week, he was an anti-imperialist.
Hey, Jeanne, I don't mean to interrupt, but I don't see anything on the screen.
I haven't started showing them yet. Do you see begin week 3?
Yeah, I got that one.
Okay, we're good. I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, great. My fault.
Yeah. No worries. So this Judge supported McKinley, who's the big imperialist. And in the 1890s, I mean, you know, their circulation was really pretty good. It was like over 50,000. And then by 1912, it had more than doubled. Life is the last one we'll probably be looking at. And it was published weekly from 1883. And it was just a very popular, it was in good competition with both Judge and Puck. So here's our first one. Can you see this one? All right. This is from Puck, January 25th, 1899. Okay, just look at it at the very bottom. I have written down, you know, school begins. Uncle Sam to his new class in civilization. Now, children, you've got to learn these lessons whether you want to or not. But just take a look at the class ahead of you and remember that in a little while, you'll feel as glad to be here as they are.
In trouble? Oh, I thought you were reading today.
Okay, I'm going to show a little bit of close-up here. These are some of them taken, some of the pieces that you can see a little bit closer.
Well, the touch one, okay, I got a recorder on the
A lot of the messages, like at the top, the consent of the governed, you know, it's a good thing in theory, but it's very rare in fact. England governed her colonies whether they consented or not by waiting for their consent, she's greatly advanced the world civilization. You might not like it, but this is what we've got to do to advance civilization. So the US must govern its new territories with or without their consent until they can govern themselves. Again, we're big, and there's actually even something up there above the door about the Confederate States of America. The Confederate States refused their consent to be governed, but the Union was preserved without their consent. You might not like it, but this is what's going to happen. Okay, so the US first lessons in self-government. Okay, we've got social Darwinism written all over this, and then the new class. Can you all see who the old class was? Just take a look at the class ahead of you.
I can't really read what's on the books.
California, Texas, Alaska,
Mhm.
all are former colonies. We've got former colonies. Okay, who do we see in the front? What's on their little belts?
Cuba, Hawaii,
Yep.
Puerto Rico.
And the Philippines. Okay, we've got our new little colonies. Okay, what are some adjectives? How would you describe the caricatures here?
Unhappy,
Unhappy,
unkempt,
Very
unkempt,
Very confused.
confused. Are they children or adults?
well,
I don't know. Children.
Hard to tell. It's
Yeah.
hard to tell.
size of children, but the faces look like adults.
Yeah.
Right.
And
So
you'll
they're-
see them portrayed a lot of times. The colonies will be portrayed as children, insolent. Some have socks, some don't have socks. None of them have shoes. Okay. How do they look behaved compared to the children behind them? Who's got their act together?
They look unruly.
Unruly.
They look unhappy, whereas the
Un-
kids behind them are contented in their studies.
Yep. They are orderly and they're with the program. They're proper. They know how to sit up straight.
They're breaking decorum.
Okay.
Except for the Native American.
I guess
that has the book upside down.
Right. Okay. Who else do we have? We've got a Native American sitting there with a book upside down.
An Asian guy at the door.
Asian guy at the door. And then who else?
Black guy washing windows.
Black guy washing windows. Okay.
Right.
Let's take a look at this because this, some of these are so good about showing us both foreign policy and domestic. Okay. Whoops. The black guy washing the windows. Does he look happy, sad? What's going on? Can you see?
He looks interested.
Yeah. How about the Indian? Can he read?
No.
It's
Can't
it's
figure
clear
out
that
what's
the
going
Indian
on.
is being cast as a hopeless case.
Absolutely. Man, he is hopeless.
But
He
the-
ain't getting
I
with the
say
program.
The black window washer looks happy.
Yep.
I guess that's why what the
He's-
Union fought the war for, huh? So that
He's,
the black
he-
people could be happy working for us.
yep, they're happy with what they have.
He has a job.
Oh my
They were-
God.
They weren't that unhappy with slavery because most of those people took care of them and provided for them. And now he's happy to do what he's been doing. It's like, and then the Indian, we have tried and tried and tried. He's a hopeless case. Stick him in the back of the room and don't worry about him. What about the Chinese guy? outside of the building. Okay, this is in 1889. Does anyone know what happened in 1882? We passed a huge law.
It was a Chinese Exclusion Act.
Absolutely. This little guy ain't crossing the threshold. He's looking in, but he ain't joining the party. What else have we got here? This is fantastic, guys. This is a great one because it also is domestic and foreign policy to a point. There's some real similarities that I hope we can talk about even next week. Okay. On the left, I'm looking at the telephone, like the telegraph pole or whatever. It's the United States. In the far, far back, you see Hawaii. You know, little guy's just there kind of chilling. And then here in the front, you see the Philippines. Okay. Somebody is sending a message and somebody's receiving a message. Can you see who's receiving the message and who's sending it?
Well, the guy receiving the message doesn't really look like a Filipino. He looks like a caricature of an
All of the
an African.
Filipinos, that is what you will see with all images of the Filipinos at this time period. He's receiving it, right? Who's sending him a message?
Like a Native American.
Okay, that's it. Speaking from experience through Professor Marconi's wireless telegraphy, American Indian to Filipino, be good or you'll be dead. This is coming out of Judge 2. Okay.
That American Indian can't read, but I guess he knows Morse code.
Okay, basically, Filipinos, you better get with the program or you're going to get wiped out. You're going to have to give in. The Philippines fought and fought and fought. They fought so hard against Spain and then against us, but we kind of screwed them there, as I think I talked about last week. So, and again, you brought up too, Tom, about the caricatures of the Filipinos. You're going to see this again and again, like a savage, darkest African, half human, half animal. You will always see the huge feet, the huge lips, kind of like what we saw Queen Lulukalani last week. Okay, let's look at this one. Okay, do you see the caption on it? What's this titled? The White Man's Burden. And let me, all right, here. Okay,
Is he carrying his profits up the hill? Is that what he's doing?
which one?
Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam, what's in his basket there? What do you see?
Savages.
Savages, right.
Why has he got a red cross on his arm?
It's the humanitarian. He's there to help and do good things. Okay, the little guy in the front with the red jacket and white pants, that's John Bull. It's England's version of our Uncle Sam. Okay, so what's at the very top of the hill? What's the word you see?
Civilization.
Civilization, and it's a bright light, you know, and a glorious woman. And the two things in her hand say education and liberty. Okay, civilization is up this damn hill of boulders and rocks and things. What kind of things are those boulders and rocks? Ignorance, cannibalism, cruelty, brutality, superstition, ignorance, oppression, vice,
Slavery.
slavery. Okay, so let's compare England and the United States. Okay, England has got, I know that you can't see it, but what do the people in John Bull's basket represent?
I see Arab, Chinese, Indian, and I
Yep.
can't tell.
It's their colonies.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Representations of their colonies. It's like Zulu, India, Sudan, China, and maybe one of the. Okay. How do they appear? Are they agreeable? Or are they fighting and fussing? Are they a pretty quiet burden or load for him to carry?
They look a little happier than the poor folks that Uncle Sam was carrying.
Those guys are crazy. They're a bunch of savages. They can't keep still. Uncle Sam, who's having a pretty good time? Who's having a pretty easy time getting up this hill? He's done it for a while now. And who's, yeah, man, he's been doing this for years. You know, he's just hiking it on up there. He's got his little colonies in order and he's getting them civilized, moving them on up. It's a burden, but nothing like the United States. Uncle Sam, you see the sweat coming off of him? He is sweating like a hooker in church. He's trying to look at his hands. He's trying to lift that burden off his back. It's so heavy. And they're all over the place. And we've got Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Samoa, and also the Philippines in ours. Okay, in 1899, yeah, it was 1899, Rudyard Kipling, he's a British writer, he wrote a poem to the United States, kind of to tell them about the costs of imperialism. And in that poem, he outlines to the United States the things you're going to have to be doing, the things you're going to have to face as an imperial nation. And that poem is called The White Man's Burden, the United States and the Philippine Islands, 1899. And it's always just come down to be known as the White Man's Burden. And it basically says, once you've subjected these people, once you rule over these people, they're your burden. Now you got to civilize them. You've got to Christianize them. You've got to take care of them like a parent has to take care of a bunch of kids. And once you become an imperial nation, you got the burden of caring for these little savages. They're half devil, half child. So you got to civilize, Christianize, educate, govern, because they can't do it themselves. There's your burden. There's your white man's burden. Now, we've already tried this with Native groups in our own country, and it was a disaster. And it continued to be a disaster. But that's what this little slide is all about, because his poem was quite well known at the time. Now we got Life comes out with a whole different twist on this. If I can get it to move. Come on. Yeah. Here we go. Here's Life. And if you would look at the very, very bottom at the caption, it says the white ? Man's burden. Is it the white man's burden or not? You know, Life really kind of put a spoof on it. Life magazine was very anti-imperialist. So, you know, it's showing a whole different version. It did not want us getting involved in all this stuff. So in this version, you see the foreign powers riding on the backs of their colonial subjects. You got Uncle Sam, and that's probably the Philippines carrying us. Behind that, you got John Bull, and maybe India is carrying him. You've got Frederick Wilhelm of Germany behind that, and it looks like one of the African nations there. And it's probably France bringing up the rear. But they had a whole different twist on it. Now, Tom, you're going to get to see another Filipino. Here we go. The white man's burden. Now we got a new twist. This is out of the New York World, a new twist on the white man's burden, because not only is it a burden that we have to civilize, Christianize, educate, govern all this other stuff. But in the Philippines, the added white man's burden was the barbarism, the incendiarism, the assassination, all the stuff he was doing. Can you all see what he's got his foot on?
Yeah.
The guy with the arrows, that's a troop. I mean, it's like looking at a cavalry officer. The uniforms were similar, but it's a military guy. He's been shot all up with arrows. This is another burden you got to deal with.
Insurgency.
Insert. Yep, exactly. Let me see what we got. Oh, I love this next one. This is a great one. And again, you get to see the Philippines. Here we go. The Philippines is always portrayed as this. All right. What's on the bayonet of the gun? Liberty and civilization. And at the bottom, it says he wouldn't take it any other way. Just like at the very first cartoon, you might not like it, but this is what we're going to do. This is how we civilize. This is how we advance. This is a great one. You might not be able to see the little name on the red outfit the guy is wearing, but that's President McKinley. Okay. Behind him is the Capitol. He's given somebody a bath. Who do you think that kid is? He's squalling and a squealing. At the bottom, it says the Filipinos' first bath. And McKinley says, "Oh, you dirty boy." He's bathing him in the water of civilization. And of course, Philippines is just fighting us like mad. And back behind, we've got two little kids all cleaned up. You know, they're getting dressed in the garb of liberty and they're just so happy. It's Puerto Rico and probably Hawaii. Okay, this is a good one too. You know, this really reflects on us basically stepping out onto the world stage of imperialism. And again, look at the images of every one of our colonies. This is what people are seeing. Okay, so this one is holding his end up. John Bull is at the lower right. Okay, with that little stovepipe-like hat. John Bull. It's really most extraordinary what training will do. Why, only the other day, I thought that man unable to support himself. John Bull is so impressed with the United States now. You know, the United States, it's not even been hardly 100 years. And here it is, an imperial giant. And you've got Frederick Wilhelm and probably France over there on the right. And on the left, you have some other imperial nations, but it looks like maybe more Russia and some of the other, Austria, a few more of the Eastern, a little bit Eastern. Okay, so he's got our colonies. Ladrone is another name for the Mariana Islands. Ladrone, Philippines, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and Cuba. All portrayed the same as little, almost like little monkeys. You know, they're not even human. And always, often, like I said, children. And here we got children again. Okay, with Cuba and the Philippines. Cuba was so happy for us to come in. And of course, Cuba got their independence fairly soon. So here's little Cuba with her piece of independence pie. And Philippines comes up and says, "What you got?" And it's all in like the old South African dialect, you know, slave dialect. "What you got?" Cuba says, "Pie." The Philippines says, "Where'd you get it?" Cuba says, "My Uncle Sam give it to me. And maybe if you was halfway decent, he'd give you some." Cuba was happy for us to come in and help out. The Philippines wanted their independence. They just weren't having this. Okay. Are we at this one? And here's the first issue of Life for the new century. This is the first issue of Life for 1900. And it's got both England and the United States. They've got their hands full, keeping control on their little empires. You know, it's really a satire on the Anglo-Saxon Christmas of 1899 that they just had. England is fighting in Egypt. They've got their issues there. And so war on earth, goodwill to nobody. The Anglo-Saxon Christmas of 1899 as we enter with all our little colonies. So understand basically, these are the images relaying the messages of racial superiority and inferiority to the public over and over and over. And the notions, they were already instilled within our own borders. And now they're being ingrained into our conscience about other people throughout the world. This is what's developing how Americans collectively, how they perceive people in these new territories. And I've got some other things for you. These are images. Get this stupid thing to work. Come on. Here we go.
Quick question.
Yes, Reggie, what's up?
You mentioned that I think it was judged that had a circulation of 50,000. Do you have any idea what the circulation of Life was at this point?
I don't. I do not. I could look that up. I don't.
Just curious as to.
I
the
don't think
balance
it was
of power.
quite as popular as Judge and Puck, but it was kind of behind there. And plus, imperialism was awful popular at the time, and Life was anti-imperialist. But that's not to say that they had a far less circulation or anything. These are more images and just presentation. Again, this is what the public is seeing. So what you're going to see next are images from the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. Okay. It was also called the Louisiana Purchase Expedition because it's celebrating the centennial or the 100 years since the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase. So this particular World's Fair, it had all these model villages and people from all over the world that simply fed the public's belief. And it had, y'all, it had so many displays like this. It has come to be known as the largest human zoo. The 1904 St. Louis World's Fair is now referred to as the largest human zoo. They brought in about 1,100 Filipinos for display in all sorts of villages. They brought in all different Native American tribes, all different African peoples, Australian Aboriginal peoples, natives from Peru and Argentina, and I'm sure Brazil. And we'll see African pygmies for the World Fair, amazing dwarfs of the Congo Valley, some red, some black. They annotate the Negro in equatorial Africa. Hold on, I got to move this. Fearless midgets who boldly attack elephants with tiny lances, bows, and arrows. You don't even have to have an image there to have an image put in your mind. And one of the African folks here, what's he holding? A monkey. This gets better. But this is, we are building this. Okay. St. Louis Day at the World Fair. And incidentally, y'all, this corresponded with the Olympics in 1904, and the Olympics were held in St. Louis. So they decided to have all these competitions. And at the same time, there's all these anthropologists, ethnologists there, and they're basically kind of doing research and all. But do you see this one? The Grand March of the Barbarians. I got to move things. Pygmies from darkest Africa, head-hunting dog eaters from Luzon in the Philippines. I don't know what in the hell a hairy anus from Yezo, Japan is, and I don't think I want to know. Giants from Patagonian, the Llanos, that's in South America. Dwarf negritos from the Philippines. Negrito is the Spanish word for little black person. Eskimo from the Bering Straits. All these strange peoples in their dances, illustrating the primitive emotions. And then we've got a story up here. The Indians boycott the pygmy neighbors, and they've stationed pickets to keep the visitors from viewing the little Africans. The pygmies are not retaliating. So basically it's an article about the Indians are jealous, and they've declared a boycott on the pygmies from Africa because too many visitors are going to see them and not the Indians. It's just nuts. Okay, and here's where the Olympics are going on, so they decide to have their own athletic games, and the barbarians meet in athletic games, pygmies in a mud fight. They had them throwing things of mud at each other, pelted each other until one edge. The Crow Indian won the mile run. Negritos captured the pole climbing event, and Patagonians beat Syrians in the tug of war. So you don't even have to have these images for them to be put in your head. Okay. And of course, they're savages. They attack visitors, they attack photographers, and on and on and on. Let me see what I'm doing here. Hold on. Okay. Timor St. Louis. Let's see what we got. Okay. So, yeah, this was nuts. But collectively, folks, collectively, the United States, it's driven, its institutions are built, it's operated, it's dominated by select white men. US politics, domestic policy, foreign policy, trade and commerce, finance and banking, publishing and books, media news, opinion, textbooks, academia and higher education. Select white men that held power in whatever respective systems that they were part of are the ones that steered and shaped the nation's collective psyche. They also wrote the historical narrative that became our national memory. What if our historical narrative had been collectively developed by indigenous groups, or African American men and women, or Chinese Americans? You know, it would be an entirely different narrative and memory. If you read an account of the Mexican-American War from the US perspective, and then you read an account from the Mexican perspective, it's not even the same war. You know, we see it as God's manifest destiny for this divinely blessed nation. They see it as an invasion where they lost over a third of their country. You know, how would Hawaiians have illustrated what was happening to their nation in 1893? How would a Filipino illustrator have shown the situation there in 1899? And we're never encouraged to even entertain the idea that our national memory is incomplete or even honest. But back to our territories. American War. Whenever the United States annexed new territory, with the exception of Mexico, it did not incorporate large non-white populations into the citizenry. And in the case of Mexico, it was a pretty thin populated part that was just in the north. But now with our new territories, as the 20th century is about to be birthed, there develops major questions in regard to citizenship and naturalization. If these places are American soil, then what does that make all the people that are there? Are they Americans? All those people we just saw pictures of, and Is everyone who's born there from now on an American? You know, how's this thing gonna work? So let's take a look at that. If I can get it to move. There we go. Okay, so from 1790 till the 14th Amendment in 1868, the Naturalization Act only allowed white immigrants to naturalize as US citizens. Okay, then in 1868, the 14th Amendment extended citizenship to African Americans who were born here simply by defining citizenship as automatic to those born in the United States. You know, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. 2 years later, in 1870, Congress passed the new Naturalization Act of 1870. That expanded eligibility to naturalize to include persons of African descent. And basically, this was just a means of providing citizenship to those former slaves that had not been born here, that had maybe been born in the Caribbean or in an African country or Brazil. But in fact, you know, during the congressional debates on the 1870 Naturalization Act, Congress specifically rejected a proposal to open naturalization to all. It remained only white or those of African descent. So after 1870, in order to naturalize as a United States citizen, you had to apply either as a white person or someone of African descent. And of course, nobody wants to apply on that because they know the value is there in being white. If you were of another race, you had to be born in the United States to have citizenship, except for Native Americans, guys. Citizenship will not apply to Native Americans for quite some time yet. So after 1868 or 1870, for example, a Chinese immigrant could still never naturalize, but their children born here would be US citizens. We had always interpreted citizenship to include those born in our territories, you know, Nevada territory, Arizona territory, Dakota territory, because they're just administrative divisions overseen by the United States. And people born in US territories, they're just automatically US citizens at birth since the 14th Amendment. Okay, well, in 1898, when we signed the Treaty of Paris that ends this war, we get these nice little territories. We get Guam, Puerto Rico, Samoa. Now we got a problem. What are we going to do with all these Asian and Afro-Caribbean people? You know, are these folks going to be considered citizens? They're not white. And we only meant that citizenship thing for former slaves, not for some strange, you know, barbarian, semi-civilized people on some Caribbean or Pacific island. You know, so the question becomes, is the Constitution going to follow the flag everywhere that we start gaining real estate now? You know, because we've left the continent. And until now, territories always had the full protection of the Constitution. And now everything is different. Sorry about that. I got to get a drink. Hold up. Now we're becoming a world power, a global colonizer. You know, McKinley, Theodore Roosevelt, Taft, they all campaigned on these platforms of expansion overseas. But they did not want to incorporate the people into us, into our national identity. McKinley called them rescued peoples, an unorganized population. And, you know, he was all about, we've got a duty to provide them law and order. Okay, Roosevelt just called them mere savages. He didn't care. He never even entertained the idea that they could be part of us. So now we got to redefine, what does it mean to be a territory? You know, and we got to reshape the meaning of territory to fit an imperialistic mindset. Well, between 1901 and, it'll depend, 1901 and anywhere up to 1911 or the 1920s. It depends on the legal scholars you talk to. The Supreme Court, thank God, came to the rescue of Anglo-American race by solving this problem in a series of cases known as the insular cases. And insular is just referring to territories that are surrounded by or insulated by water. Okay, so through the insular cases, the Supreme Court established two entirely new statuses to legally define our territories. That of either incorporated or unincorporated. If a territory is incorporated, then the Constitution only applies to that territory. If a territory is unincorporated, the Constitution only applies partially, even though that unincorporated territory is still controlled by the United States. And this little cartoon on the lower left out of the Washington Post, there were debates going on in 1900 as to whether or not the Constitution should apply in Puerto Rico, which is what's going on here. And ultimately, you know, we'll see this next week. But the Supreme Court kind of settled the debate by saying, well, it's really up to Congress. You know, Congress gets to choose what territories are incorporated or unincorporated, you know, and if the Constitution doesn't apply. Instead, territories belong to, but they are not part of the United States. And then on the right, as we see overheard in the National Art Gallery, Puerto Rico says to Hawaii, I reckon he must be our stepfather. Hey, Hawaii. Oh, gosh. These are too good. Oops, we ain't going to week 4. Okay. So the court also defined what each status meant. Incorporated territories are those which Congress intends to make part of the United States. People of incorporated territories are United States citizens with all the rights of the Constitution. However, without congressional intent for a territory to become part of the United States, said the court, such territories are unincorporated, and the residents of unincorporated territories only have fundamental rights, but not full constitutional rights. And that's not even fully defined. What are fundamental rights? However, even in unincorporated territories, Congress may, at their discretion, extend United States citizenship to those people. And also, basically through the insular cases, the Supreme Court gave Congress plenary power or full power and authority over unincorporated territories. Congress rules unincorporated territories rather than the Constitution. And so next week, we'll pick up again with the insular cases. We'll look at a couple of them. And we're also going to look at the thinking of the Supreme Court justices at the time. Their mindset and beliefs are important because their construction of incorporated and unincorporated territory, it it largely turned on their views of the people who lived there. People that they describe in the published opinions with words like half civilized, savage, aliens, ignorant, lawless. And for the most part, these cases were decided by the very same justices that decided Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, that it held separate but equal. That case was overturned in 1954, but the insular cases, which were built on the same racist worldview, they still stand today. And things are still coming before the court. There's a case before them now, I think, dealing with Samoa. And these have never been overturned. So we'll look at the insular cases next week, and we'll also look a little bit at the status of our territories more recently today. But I'm hoping that we'll also have a little bit of time to look at some similarities between the insular cases in determining congressional power over our territories, and one particular Native American case called Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock. In that case, the Supreme Court determined power over Indian nations, and there were some uncanny similarities. And of course, it's the same court. You know, this is the same court that does Plessy, the insular cases, and Lone Wolf. You know, and it's worth looking at the mindset that's there. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, that is it. Okay, let me turn my video back on. Okay, there we go. I'm back. And so that's it for tonight.
All right, that was great.
Uh-oh, Tom, I'm so sorry. Of course, I wasn't even looking at the chat. It's not.
Oh, well,
even
actually that scratching noise went away after I sent you the text, so I figured you'd seen it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay. Syrians, really? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Really, Syrians. And in fact, when we get into the well, we're not going to get into this, but I get into it a little bit with my kids in class. The court could not figure out, Joy, are Syrians white or not? You know,
I can tell you that Syrians think they're white.
well,
Arabs believe they're white, by the way. They think they're
and the court in the early teens, you know, because this is coming in with the immigration, with the naturalization issues, folks will want to naturalize, and it's like, we've got to tell the court we're white, you know, and the court is going through all these definitions. And so 1 year Syrians will be white, Arabs will be white, you know, a couple of years later, they're not white. And then a year later, they're white. And then 3 years later, they're not white. And it went back and forth.
Which just proves that it's all a construct completely.
It is a construct. Exactly. Yeah.
It really reminds me of war in general, you know, where it's important to dehumanize the opponents and even the civilian populations. And that's what they were doing.
Oh, yeah. One of the things we were doing in the Philippines, believe it or not, was waterboarding.
Ooh.
Hold on. I'm going to share my screen with you again. Hold up. I got to find that. It made the cover of Life magazine. Okay. Let me escape out of this. Okay, let me see if I can find it. I had it hidden in here, I think. Oh, here we go. Let me unhide it. All right. Life magazine, this is May 22nd of 1902. Okay, all the big European imperialists are standing behind us, and they say, the chorus in the background says, those pious Yankees can't throw stones at us anymore. And there the US is, we're waterboarding a Filipino guy. stop share. I'm not the quickest with this. Here we go. So, okay, let me see what else is. I don't see a slide. Reggie, did you get to see the slides? Okay, you did. I'm so sorry. I'm just now looking at these chats. It's like Cuba. Haha. Okay. It's interesting. It occurs to me that we didn't call our colonies that. Yeah. Yeah, we did. We did. And eventually we'll start to classify what we will say citizens of, oh, I can't think how it was termed, but of the Puerto Rican, whatever. We got so clever at this, y'all. Ladrone is the Mariana Islands. Okay. Okay. Did I cover everything in the chat here? I think so. Okay. It looks like we lost some people.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's so depressing.
Oh, my God.
It's awful. I was reading that article that you made a point of sending to me.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Last time, because I missed it from the first week or something like that. And, it was just so upsetting. It's like, have we not made any progress? Seriously?
Well, the thing, it's a problem, Joy, because we won't even look at the facts first. We got to look. We just got to look at the honest reality before we can start to.
I know, and I get, it upsets me so much. And then I get sometimes blamed for, having white fragility, and expecting other people to look after my feelings, but I don't know what to do about it.
I don't either. I know, I don't either, but it's just the truth. And it's like,
anyway, Tom saved this really cool graphic that I liked from the movement school that came through.
Can you share it?
Yeah,
on the screen?
Tom, I think Tom can share.
I got it up here. Let's see. Can you see it?
Yes. Let me look. Meta context, intersectionality, aka reality.
It was so illuminating when I first saw this about
Oh my gosh.
intersections between these things.
Oh yeah. Where did you get this, Tom?
I got it from Joy.
Oh, where did you get it, Joy?
Here, I'll drop it's from the movement school that some people from the Green Party basically put together.
That is really good.
I will drop a link to to their site. Movement.
Yeah, that was a really good class, the movement school.
Okay, and all this stuff, guys, it all goes with imperialism, capitalism, markets, patriarchy. Uncle Sam is always the parent having to take care of these children. This is really good. Thanks for sharing.
And this is from the 2017 version of the handouts, which you can get right at that website. Okay. Which is, they updated it in the 2018, and it's not as good. It doesn't have the pictures like this. So use this one.
I will.
It was just so, when I first saw that, I was just kind of blown away, and I keep sharing it every chance I get,
Yeah.
To see those connections, however, really.
Okay. You had said, let me get back to Zoom. You had said something, you feel like you're showing white fragility or something every so often. It's like, what can you do about it? Yeah, I know, because sometimes you just feel so overwhelmingly.
Well, it feels like a gut punch to me when
it's a gut punch.
You have to look at that, and I don't know how to not feel gut punched.
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
And it's not that you're feeling sad about, it's not about your feelings, but you can't face this stuff without some emotion.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a
And
hard one.
I certainly don't expect anybody to have anything to say that'll make it better, because it's history.
Right.
That's
right.
like the little guy in the window washing the window,
Mhm.
smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, that would make me feel better, right? If everybody said, well, we like it this way.
Yeah.
But I don't expect anybody to do that.
Yeah. And
I'm
again,
just saying, look, this is disgusting, and I feel it
Right.
like a gut punch.
and if you think about who were the artists, the illustrators, who were the people writing the newspaper articles, it's a reasonable conclusion to make. It is a reasonable leap to say they're white. It is a reasonable leap to say they're men. It is a reasonable leap to say they're well educated. Stupid people don't necessarily, we don't get these messages throughout the whole United States from stupid people. These are smart people.
Yeah.
But they are white,
Yes.
they're male, their socioeconomic is probably, they can feed their kids. Their education, what else? But if you just think of all those factors,
Well,
it's the same group of people. The message is going to the same group of people. Who's getting judged? People who are literate, educated, who've got money to buy it. So they're
it's really hard to see privilege when you're living in the middle of it, and especially when nobody's pointing it out to you. Everybody's just reinforcing it.
they're just reinforcing it. Who was going to the World's Fair? Those were white upper class people who could travel, people who had money, people who were interested in the world, interested in other people's, they feel like they're growing and learning, but they're growing and learning the wrong stuff. There's no context to all these people except primitive. That's the only context that's given. And look at all the good we're doing by bringing them civilization. Yeah, this has been a
But if you-
fascinating.
If you think about what imperialism is really all about, which is exploitation of
Mhm.
all sorts of resources,
Resources.
it's
and
just
people.
like stupid. Yeah, I meant
Yeah.
people as resources.
Yeah.
It's just stupid to think that that is a good way, long-term way, to think that you're I just don't, it just boggles my mind that you come along to a civilization like the Plains Indians, who completely, were had a society that functioned really well within its environment.
Yep.
It wasn't, it wasn't exploitative.
It was
And then
sustainable.
and then to call what we're doing civilization,
Right.
uh,
There's some really good parallels between what we do as imperialists to people in these places and with Native Americans. There's some good parallels, but one big difference is we only wanted the natural resources, the land and the things under the land that these people were on. So they physically are a problem. We got to get them off. We got to get rid of them.
well, one of the differences between how we colonized and how England colonized is that that's how we treated the natives because they weren't governable. So we just had to get them off. Whereas England went and became like the upper class of India and just used that population as its working class.
Right. So that was the difference in that when we get these territories, we don't want to get rid of them, but we want them to get all the stuff that they got and get it to us. You know, we want their cheap labor because we don't want to move in there. They could stay there. We don't want it. We just want the stuff they got.
But you just made the point that I was going to make, which is that imperialism is a necessity for the perpetuation of capitalism. That's why imperialism exists.
Yeah.
Because capital has to grow ad infinitum.
That image that Joy had is perfect. Capitalism was right there with all this. Oh man. You know, and it's like we're trapped because we can't exist in our society without money. You know, yeah.
Well, we could, but we forgot how.
Yeah.
I'm in a Marxist study group right now that's reading Debord, French Marxist from the 60s, who goes into the spectacle and how our reality has been taken over by capitalism, and we no longer our reality is capitalism. We don't know anymore what it was like to not be capitalist.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I want to be in a Marxist study group.
I want to know how does it work without money? How do you have a society without money? It's a concept I can't even think of.
There a lot of stuff came out of this pandemic, mutual aid.
Right, that's where our
People
Marx
helping each
group
other.
came
That's
from. We started it when pretty much when the pandemic was declared. But money, Marx, you gotta slog through some pretty tough jungle to get to the beginning of Marx. You've got to start to understand how his vocabulary works and some of the basic principles. But money is an abstract representation of value, and it is only money is it feels like a thing, but it's not really a thing.
Okay.
I remember one time saying to my tax man about taxes that I owed that, well, I can see that the government, is perfectly happy for me to never get out from underneath this, because it's debt that's, running our financial system now. That tax man got really mad at me for saying that.
Well, you're right. Debt expands your ability to consume commodities.
Yep.
That's how you can keep.
And that's
the market
another
growing.
way to grow, for capitalism to grow, is for debt
without
to grow.
money.
Yep.
Yeah, well, but that's servitude, right?
Yes. Hello. Thank you. By the way, I did finally get my taxes all paid off. So
Oh man.
phooey on them.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not too familiar with how to do this. Hi invited me to participate, so I had one idea to introduce, and it has to do with the development of the means of production. One of the things that I've studied over the years is that societies actually go through revolutionary changes in the means of production. So when you introduce different new means of production that change everything, like a common example would be the steam engine, the double-acting steam engine, which actually made all this imperialism possible, so that you were shipping goods all over the world, not by a sailboat, but by these other powers, and that changed manufacturing, revolutionized it, you could say. And that what's happened in the last 50 years, and I was in a small tool and die shop in California at the time, they introduced computers into production. And it's absolutely changed everything. And what it's done, most importantly, from a Marxist point of view, I would say, is it's cheapened labor. Labor has gone down to, the value of labor has been reduced to almost zero, so that a working person in the world today is like a refugee, wandering from all over the world. People are 47 million. Some people are moving around the world looking for a way to live. And it's unsustainable. That's the only hope I have, is that if you have 3 people owning more wealth than half of the bottom population, that's an unsustainable reality. And we are going to change this because we have to be compatible with the means of production. We have to control everything that is now controlled by this handful of billionaires. So it's going to happen. This kind of information that you've done tonight is really welcome and so helpful to see where we've come from.
Good, thanks. Well, next week, we're still on for next week. Everything going for Tuesday?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, next week we'll cover those. We'll talk a little bit about the insular cases, and I hope I can do a little bit of comparison with a couple of similar cases in the United States with Indians, and of course with Plessy versus Ferguson. Same group of justices. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. And
Thank
I'll
Thank you.
see
Thank
y'all
you,
next
Jeanne.
week.